Hello and welcome to this episode of the differences between Jonathan Johnson and Gary Herbert. I'm Spencer Higginbotham. Today I'm going to be talking about Medicaid expansion. As Governor Herbert said, this is definitely a very complex issue, and you'll see why as I start talking about this. First off, I'm going to make it clear by looking at the Constitution that Obamacare was unconstitutional. I feel like most of you already agree with me anyway, but I'm going to reaffirm it. So, I guess let's go to the Bill of Rights first. Okay. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So, the federal government only has the powers that the Constitution specifically gives it. Now, I guess to clear up a misunderstanding, Common Core, the reason why in my earlier episode where I said I thought that having all states reach the same standard was a good idea, that was not a federal government initiative, that was a state's initiative. This is different. This was definitely proposed by the federal government. That's why it's called Obamacare. So, let's see. So Article 1 is about the powers that the legislative branch has. Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The first one, Section 2, is just describing what the House of Representatives is. The Section 3 is just representing how the Senate is. And then number 4, Section 4 is just how they're elected. Section 5, it's about it's policies about meetings and stuff. Section 6 is how they get paid. So far none of this has to do with Medicare at all. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. So basically delegating which powers are for House of Representatives and which ones are for Senate. And then Section 8 is the powers that Congress has. So the power shall be to lay and collect taxes, borrow money on the credit of the United States, regulate commerce with foreign nations, establish a uniform rule of naturalization, coin money, provide punishment for counterfeiting, establish post offices and post roads, progress of science, constitute tribunals inferior to Supreme Court, define and punish piracies, declare war, raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, make rules for government and regulation on the land and naval forces, provide for calling forth to the militia, organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, exercise legislation, and all that. None of that has to do with medical. And to make all laws that shall be necessary and proper for carrying out execution the foregoing powers. So, yeah, none of that has anything to do with Medicare. Number 9 is talking about immigration. And number 10 is what powers are specifically not given to the state, because the Bill of Rights said any powers not given to the Congress, not given to the federal government or prohibited from the state government, and basically makes a list of the stuff that the Congress said in the first paragraph. Imports and exports, use the Treasury, keep troops, ships of war, all this stuff. None of this stuff has anything to do with healthcare. Now, what about the executive branch? They're described in Article 2. So the first section is basically how the president is elected. The second section is how he's commander-in-chief over the Army and Navy. And then Section 3 is basically the way that he's allowed to associate with the legislative branch. And then Section 4 is about impeachment. And I don't think I have to show you the judicial branch's powers, because clearly it wasn't the judicial branch that originated Medicare. So yes, as the 10th Amendment says, if the Constitution does not give the federal government power to do something, then they're not supposed to do it, and it has not given them power over Medicare. So, and also, just to, I want to share a couple of examples of why this issue is so debatable. My first example was when I was in the California Santa Rosa mission, and I was there for 9 months, and there was this lady that we helped move, and she didn't have very many people in her family helping at all. Her husband was not helping because he was somewhere else doing something. Her daughter was putting up a fit and refusing to help. The only person in her family who was helping her was her sister. And she was a hoarder, so she had a lot of stuff. And so us missionaries, we helped her a lot, and we asked the members to help us a lot. But what the members kept telling us was, she needs to be more self-reliant. She needs to be able to take more responsibility for what she's doing. Everyone needs help when they're moving, and especially this woman. For one thing, she was a hoarder, and for another thing, I think she probably had some sort of chronic illness, like she was under a lot of stress, and she had a hard time with handling stress, and we could tell the whole time that she was stressed out. She was calling me in the middle of the night to talk about how stressed she was, and I don't think that was an example of someone who needed to take more personal initiative. That was an example of someone who really, truly needed help, and could not provide that help for herself. My second example, after I came home early for health issues from the California Santa Rosa mission, after about 4.5 months, I went back out and I served in the Family and Church History Headquarters mission in Salt Lake City. I eventually had to get sent home early for that one as well. But when I was there, you'd think that a lot of the problems that exist in California wouldn't exist in Utah, and to some extent that's true, but as far as like seeing people who needed help, I mean, we were on Temple Square, and I mean, that's the kind of place where people go when they're in the mode of a spirit of giving, and so that's where people go when they want to take advantage of people who like to give. And I remember talking, this one person came up and talked to me and said, "Hey, can you give me like $5 so I can buy a hamburger?" Now, as missionaries, we had a very difficult budget to stay within. We had just under $200 a month, which meant that we had $6 per day, which was $2 per meal. That is very difficult. And so for me, this guy saying that he wanted to spend $5 on one meal, I mean, that was an example of someone who was just not responsible enough. I'm not saying everyone should live on a budget of $2 per meal, because that was definitely a short-term thing, but this guy, this guy was trying to get us to help him to buy fast food, which is not the cheapest. And he was unwilling to be responsible enough to find ways to get the same amount of food, better food, for a cheaper price. So it's really hard to distinguish between people who really need help and people who just need to learn responsibility. I mean, in those two cases, it was pretty easy, but I mean, that's not really something that the federal government or even the state government can do. My personal opinion is that I don't even think it should be the states that do it. I think it should be the cities that do it. Because, as Jonathan Johnson says, and I agree with him on this, the distance between the giver and the receiver needs to be as short as possible so that the receiver does not feel as entitled. And so, and another reason why that's important is because the closer people are to individuals, the more easily they can tell whether they just need to learn responsibility or if they really need help. And so, it's definitely a complex issue, as Governor Herbert said. So this is an article about what Governor Herbert tried to do with Healthy Utah, the first attempt that was brought up. Open, we already had the window open before we opened that. Okay. He unveils his plan for covering Utah's in the healthcare gap. Basically, as Governor Herbert said in the debate, he said that President Obama, contrary to what the Constitution allowed, said that the taxes for healthcare were mandatory. We had to pay the taxes. We could choose whether or not we wanted the benefits of Obamacare. And that was very unconstitutional, but we had no choice but to accept that. We did try to sue the federal government for that, and we failed. Governor Herbert was the first one to do it, as he said. So this was basically, by the numbers, his plan for helping people. As you can see, stuff that doesn't really cost very much, like doctor visit, or let's see, what's another one? I remember at least one other that wasn't very mental or behavioral health. We don't really need, I mean, that stuff is, it's very important. It just doesn't require a whole lot of, it's not like it doesn't require physical tools, is what I mean. And then also the other stuff like urgent care, emergency room, true emergency, those are the things that are the cheapest. Those are the things that we're getting them to pay the least for. And then other stuff, maybe we can ask them to pay a little bit more, depending on where they are in the income. And then we scroll down a little bit, and the internet cooperates. It would help 95,000 working poor statewide buy health insurance. So people who are poor but working, as this says, Kylie Topance, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. I asked Kylie Topance to try to pronounce my last name, Higginbotham, is just the kind of person that Governor Herbert's Healthy Utah plan is designed to help. Sick but working, too poor to qualify for federal health insurance subsidies, but unable to qualify for Utah's Medicaid program. So, I mean, you'd have to do more research in order to really tell whether or not this really was a good idea. But I think it's pretty clear that at least Herbert's intentions were good. He was trying to help the people like that lady on my mission who really needed help, but trying not to give too much help to those people who really don't need help, who just need to learn responsibility. So, and there's not really an easy way to do that. My plan would have been different. My plan would have been to go to the cities, but at least his intentions were good. Now, as far as it goes with the other one, I forget what it was called, but the other thing that Jonathan Johnson mentioned, where Herbert proposed it and then 48 hours later was trying to run away from it. Just something he said that caught my attention, that Johnson said. He said, I think that a real leader does not, when he proposes something, sticks with it and supports it. Basically what I heard him say was, A good leader does not change his mind. As you will see a couple questions later, the question about voting, Jonathan Johnson changed his mind on something. He decided to stop collecting signatures. It's okay for people to change their mind. Mitt Romney used to be accused of changing his mind, but really, it's what honest people do. I remember Mitt Romney saying, I would rather have someone for president who's willing to reason and change his mind once in a while than someone who's going to be stubborn all the time. So, yeah, true leadership is willing to listen to other people and make proper adjustments. And I believe that Governor Herbert is doing that. So that's all I have to say about Medicaid expansion. So up next, I'm going to talk about the next question. We'll see you then.